This is an addendum to the interview of Pat Powers for the Oral History Project of the Waterford Historical Society. Today is May 11th, 2017. And Pat will tell us about her experience working for Mrs. Davies.
Well, I was a teenager. In my early teens, actually, I started working there. Mrs. Davies was a lovely person. She hired most of her work done, was able to do that, and there were others who worked there as well. I enjoyed my time there, and it was a very good learning experience. I used to do cleaning. I helped in the kitchen. There was a cook. Mrs. Fitchett was the cook, and sort of saw overall the work that was done. She would tell me what to do. And I waited on table. Mrs. Davies would always come to the dining room. The place was all set for her. And I would wait on her. I had a uniform to wear. And she even had finger bowls. But what a learning experience it was. And sometimes she would read to me, or I would read to her. And it was just a wonderful time. I've always been thankful that I could have that experience. And I'm not sure what else I should tell you, but...
Well, I saw a picture of you with your bicycle. And when I asked
you
with
my
it,
bicycle.
You said you were on your way to work.
Yes, I probably was. I did. I could ride my bike up to work. And sometimes I would even stay there. She had a third floor. I've forgotten what we called it, but it was for the help. Mrs. Fitchett would actually lived up there while she was working there, and I would stay there as well at times if it got late or whatever. But she had company quite often. She would have ladies from over in Bethlehem, New Hampshire, who came for a tea in the afternoon, and I'd wait on them. Bring their cookies and tea or whatever. Usually had a silver service that we used. Quite a fancy situation for me.
Did Mrs. Fitchett teach you how to serve?
Yes. Yes, I believe I learned a lot of things while working there. I know that my pay wasn't, compared to today, very much. It was $3 a week. The cook got $5 a week. But that $3 could go so far compared to what the prices are today. And it was always something I looked forward to. She had a library table in her bedroom and always put the $3 under a book on the table. And I always looked forward to that $3. But it was just great to be there. There were others who worked there as well. A couple of them were older, but I'm not exactly sure, and I can't remember how I happened to get the job. But it was something that was really helpful, and always been glad for.
Did you ever have meals there while you're...
Oh, sure, yes. Mrs. Fitchett was a very good cook. And that's another thing that Mrs. Davies would, at the beginning of the week, make her meal plans for the week. And also the shopping for the different ingredients. So Mrs. Fitchett, of course, took care of that. But sometimes I was involved in keeping track of what we had and needed or whatever. But that was the way we...
Did you go after school?
Of course, most of it would have been in the summer or after school. And I don't recall whether I was still in graded school when I started, but I'm pretty sure it was probably around 12 years old. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I think maybe by the time I was 16, someone else took my place.
So you were there 4 years.
Yes, yes. And she was a very, very nice person. I always liked her a lot.
Now, her children were grown and moved out at the time?
She had 2 daughters. One lived in Glencoe, Illinois, and one lived in Boston. And the one who lived in Illinois lived also in the house which is across from where the school was, the Allport place. And they would come for the summer. And so quite often they were over at her mother's place. And the one in Boston would come more often, usually for a weekend or something like that. But I used to help prepare and get things ready for them. So
they had children of their own as well.
They did have children. Yes, yes, they had. They had children. The Allports had several children, and I don't recall for sure, but I know that the other daughter had children too.
And so Mrs. Davies was ambulatory, and at the time you worked there?
She was, when I was there, she was very able to get around and do things, just was capable of having help, and that's the way they did things. They owned quite a bit of property as well in White Village. Yeah. Not sure what else you would like me to...
No, that's great. Do you happen to, not that you were able to call her by her first name then, but do you remember her first name?
Marion. Marion Davies, yes. Yes.
And the library was the Davies Memorial Library at the time?
It was. The library, of course, used to be in what they call the By Place, the little house that's next to Rabbit Hill. That was called the By Place in her sister's name. That I guess her last name was By, and the library was down in the basement part of that building until they moved it across the street. Of course, they did some renovation to that building.
Because that was a store, wasn't it?
I'm sorry?
Wasn't that a store?
That I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that, but I do know that they did renovation so they could have the library upstairs. They gave it to the town, I believe, as long as they would use it as a library. And
So, well, describe the Rabbit Hill Inn, which was her residence at the time. because it was a tavern back in the day, and so when she lived there, how was that
Well, of
designed?
course, the tavern part was before my time.
Yeah.
And the long part, where now the motel or whatever is situated, was called the ballroom. It was a very long room, and I especially remember having to wash all of the little panes in the glass windows. That was a learning experience. And, excuse me, what was the other thing that you asked me?
Was the home, was that just had been reconfigured as a home when she lived there?
It was. She had a lovely living room and another reading room, I would call it. Then she had a very nice dining room before you went into the ballroom. And under the ballroom was the garage where her car was kept, and a storage place where they kept canned goods, and I'm not exactly sure what the rest of it was, but that's what it was then. Now it's a motel.
Yeah. And she had been a widow for
Yes,
wow.
I'm not exactly sure either about how long she had been a widow, but they lived in Boston for some time, I'm sure, and anyway, they were financially able to do the things they did.
Well, let me ask you about Route 18 in those days. It was curvy. It wasn't the same Route 18 we have today, was it?
No, they did do some work on Route 18, yes. They widened it, I believe, and I'm not exactly sure what the changes were, but the same route, but
The same
just a little more construction, yeah. hmm I don't know if there's other
trying to think.
things that you, yeah. She had a lovely flower garden in the back of you went from the kitchen door, you went into the flower garden, and she had a caretaker who did the lawns and all of the caretaking of the buildings, and took care of the flower garden, which was very lovely. I would pick flowers out there from time to time and fix a bouquet for the hall or table or whatever. So yeah, those were interesting days.
Sounds like a lovely experience.
It
really,
was. It
for a
was.
young girl. Learning all that and
It was very much a learning experience. Yes. Yeah. I don't know what else it could be that I could. The caretaker was Mr. Carpenter, Ernest Carpenter. His wife was Beta Carpenter. And I believe you had a poem written by Beta Carpenter at our poem. And he was the caretaker. They lived in one of the buildings across the street, the one next to what is now the library. It used to be called East and West Tontine because those two buildings had a connection between them. You could go from one building to the other on a little porch type connection. And that's where he lived and worked there at the Rabbit Hill. What else?